Warning. What you're about to hear will challenge the curated headlines, the media's selective outrage, and the narratives that get handed down from the mountaintops of the DC echo chamber. This podcast doesn't tiptoe around uncomfortable truths or apologize for asking questions that legacy outlets won't. If you believe in transparency over theater, justice over agenda, and the Constitution over career politicians, this ride's for you. And if not, well, buckle up anyway. Reality has a way of catching up.
So let me get this straight. Adam Schiff, the guy who spent 4 years pretending to have evidence he never produced, is suddenly allergic to transparency?
Mortgage frauds, just the cover. You think they'd publicly admit what he really did with those classified briefings?
And once again, the DOJ's sense of timing is oddly convenient.
Coming up, one Schiff, 2 houses, and a pile of paperwork that could sink more than his mortgage rate. It's Wednesday, and if you've been following the headlines, you know the swamp creatures are eating their own. From a sitting senator under federal investigation to sealed transcripts that the public paid for but isn't allowed to see. This week's been a masterclass in elite self-preservation. Today, we're hitting 2 of the biggest stories the media's trying to bury. First, Adam Schiff's real estate scandal finally gets a legal spotlight. Then we'll crack open the Ghislaine Maxwell grand jury debate. And no, it's not over. Not even close. So grab your coffee, crank the volume, and get ready. Because here at Data and Dissonance, we don't just decode the headlines, we disarm them. Today's episode is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke Thriller series, including The Covenant Protocol and The Prophet Directive. If you like deep state drama, political espionage, and main characters who don't take orders from corrupt systems, Caleb's your guy. Available now on Amazon. And if you're tired of watching DC insiders break every rule they enforce on the rest of us, check out the latest drop at the Data and Dissonance merch store. The new Don't Tread on Liberty tee is flag-drenched defiance in cloth form and selling fast. Grab it before it disappears like accountability in Congress. First up, Adam Schiff, once the Democrats' golden boy for Trump investigations, now finds himself under the microscope. And not just politically. A criminal investigation is underway. The irony writes itself.
I've been waiting years for this one. You mean to tell me the same guy who smeared Trump nonstop for collusion he could never prove, while leaking like a broken faucet, is now being investigated for lying to banks to get better mortgage rates? That's not just hypocrisy, it's poetic justice. The guy used his position to shape narratives that damage reputations and national unity, and now we're supposed to pretend it's just some little paperwork mix-up? Come on, this isn't just about a house. It's about the rot in DC that lets these people think they're untouchable. If Schiff lied about his primary residence to dodge lending rules, he belongs behind bars. No lectures, no CNN spin, just handcuffs and due process.
I'll be honest. I don't trust most of what comes out of the DOJ these days, no matter who it targets. But this smells like karma. Schiff built a career on manufacturing narratives, grandstanding in front of cameras, and pretending he had evidence the rest of the world just hadn't seen yet. He was the poster child for weaponized committees. And now the system he helped bloat might actually be turning on him? I'm torn between popcorn and principled concern. Because while I want accountability, I also know how quickly these investigations become media tools, distractions, or worse, controlled takedowns to clean house before bigger names fall. Either way, Schiff's silence speaks volumes. And if he's innocent, why hasn't he demanded transparency?
Look, y'all are focused on the fraud, but I'm telling you, this is just the surface. Mortgage trickery, that's the excuse. The real story's in the timing. Why now? Why Schiff? Why this administration? You think they're just randomly investigating a former Intel committee chair? Please. Something deep is about to break, and they're throwing Schiff under the bus before he spills it. My theory, he knows where bodies are buried, figuratively, and maybe literally. The deep state doesn't eat its own unless there's blood in the water. This is controlled demolition, plain and simple. Watch who distances themselves from him next week. That'll tell you who's nervous.
So the man who built his name on secrets, leaks, and lies might have finally written a check his mortgage couldn't cash. But the question isn't just whether Schiff broke the law, it's whether the system investigating him can still be trusted to uphold it. And maybe, just maybe, we're about to see what happens when the swamp decides one of its own is expendable. If segment 1 was about political hypocrisy in a house of cards, segment 2 is about the walls that never come down, especially when the names behind them wield legacy, money, and power. Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers are now fighting tooth and nail to keep her grand jury transcripts sealed. Their argument? Public release would damage her appeal and expose irrelevant information. But with Epstein's ghost still haunting half of Washington, the question is, what are they really afraid of us seeing?
Let me say this plainly. Justice doesn't hide in sealed transcripts. Maxwell's team is pulling the same elitist maneuver we've seen time and time again, shielding privileged predators behind legal jargon and due process theater. They say unsealing the grand jury testimony would jeopardize her appeal. But to the public, it just looks like another powerful circle closing ranks. These weren't private therapy sessions. They were sworn statements about crimes that affected real victims. We're talking about a woman already convicted of trafficking minors for a dead billionaire who allegedly had half the global elite on speed dial. And yet here we are, still being told we don't have the clearance to know who enabled what. Transparency shouldn't end where legacy names begin.
Amen. This whole thing smells like a second layer of cover-up. They act like the public can't handle the truth. But maybe it's the truth that can't handle daylight. We watch this same DOJ drag Trump through the courts on everything from paperwork to parking violations. But when it comes to Epstein's circle, suddenly they get shy. You've got people still asking how a guy under suicide watch managed to kill himself in a cell with broken cameras and sleepy guards. And now we're supposed to trust that sealing the files is about fairness? Give me a break. If this was some MAGA group tied to that flight log, those transcripts would be carved into CNN's Chiron by lunchtime. The double standard is outrageous, and people are tired of being told to shut up and move on.
You want to know why they're sealing it? Because the names aren't just powerful, they're connected to entire institutions, judges, CEOs, foreign allies, politicians with fake smiles and real crimes. This isn't about Ghislaine anymore. She's the firewall, the meat shield. Keep the transcripts sealed, and the network survives. Let them out, and suddenly, people start connecting dots that were never supposed to be public. Epstein's island wasn't a fantasy. It was infrastructure. And these transcripts, they're the blueprint. Of course they don't want them out. If that list drops before November 2026, it could rewrite everything, from Senate control to corporate media funding. That's why this matters. This isn't legal, it's strategic.
So while a convicted trafficker plays legal chess with the feds, the American people sit behind a locked door, once again told that full disclosure is too dangerous, too messy, too inconvenient. But here's the truth. If justice depends on secrecy, it's not justice. It's control. And the more they fight to keep it buried, the more obvious it becomes. There's something in those transcripts worth digging up. Across this country, there's a quiet army of patriots, people who get up early, work late, raise their families, and ask for nothing more than the truth. They don't have access to classified briefings. They don't get insider mortgage rates or sealed court transcripts. What they have is grit, principle, and a deep belief that justice should apply to everyone, not just the connected. Today, we talked about Adam Schiff, once the voice of moral outrage, now silent as a criminal probe circles his own record. And we talked about Ghislaine Maxwell, who trafficked children for a dead man whose client list remains sealed tighter than a Pentagon war file. But patriots? We see through it. Because the people who built this country didn't do it behind closed doors. They did it in the open, with their names signed at the bottom of documents that could have cost them their lives. That's what truth used to mean. And it's what it still means to us. So to every listener out there who refuses to bow, who still demands answers, who still believes this country is worth saving. You're not alone. You're the heartbeat of this republic. And no matter how loud the lies get, your quiet conviction will always echo louder. 2 stories, 1 theme. Whether it's Schiff maneuvering behind mortgages or Maxwell hiding behind sealed transcripts, the elites don't fear the law, they manipulate it. But let's hear what the panel has to say before we close it out.
What blows my mind is how predictable all of this has become. Schiff gets caught up in a fraud investigation, and the media acts like it's a weather report. Mildly interesting, but ultimately forgettable. Meanwhile, every MAGA voter who blinked too loud in 2020 got dragged through a congressional circus. And don't even get me started on Maxwell. If her last name was Trump, they'd have her transcripts in the Smithsonian by now. The double standard is disgusting, and every time these people avoid accountability, it tells us exactly who the system is built to protect. And it ain't us. But that's why shows like this matter. Because if they're going to keep playing the long con, we've got to keep calling it out. Loud, clear, and every damn day.
This is the stuff that makes people lose faith in institutions. When someone like Adam Schiff, who spent years claiming to be the moral compass of Congress, suddenly can't answer a single question about his own finances? That's not irony. That's exposure. And with Maxwell, it's even worse. We're not asking for gossip. We're asking for transparency about crimes that destroyed real lives. The fact that she and her legal team feel comfortable enough to demand silence just shows how broken the system is. But you know what? That's not an excuse to disengage. It's a reason to double down, ask harder questions, push for more answers. Because if we stop demanding accountability, they'll stop pretending it even matters.
Both of these stories are smoke signals, not accidents, not coincidences. The people in power are always 10 moves ahead, and this is cleanup mode. Schiff's being dealt with because he knows too much. Maxwell's transcripts are being buried because they'd open doors nobody once walked through. This isn't about guilt or innocence, it's about leverage. Who has it? Who controls it? And who gets silenced to protect it? If you think the swamp's eating its own, you're only half right. The truth is, this is all choreography, a staged purge to distract the public while the real operations go on uninterrupted. Stay alert, stay skeptical, and watch the ones who suddenly vanish from the spotlight. They were probably telling the truth.
Today, we peeled back layers most shows won't even touch. One senator under federal investigation, one trafficker trying to keep her secret sealed, and a media complex that yawns while the foundations of justice crack under their weight. But you know what? That's why we're here. Not to feed the spin, but to challenge it. And we'll keep doing that, day after day, episode after episode, with voices that won't fold and facts they can't erase. Because truth isn't a brand, it's a responsibility. And whether we're shouting it from rooftops or whispering it over coffee, we owe it to this country to keep speaking it. Remember to speak truth, stir thought.